All right. Well, we need to get a sweat rag over
Dear
here
God.
because I am perspiring with the constant blitz of news that is coming out here
So many
on Free
things.
Agency Monday.
So
It's
many things.
it's wild. Well, we just had a great talk with Chris Truelove, former NFL scout for the Denver Broncos for 16 years, and you broke the news about Kirk Cousins signing with the Atlanta Falcons during that show. So that was just the latest iteration of all of this stuff we're going to be talking about on this show. Of course, Russell Wilson's going to be the headliner here, going to the Pittsburgh Steelers, but we're going to talk about Kirk. We're going to talk about some other big free agency moves. Baker Mayfield going to stay with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and a lot of other craziness from Free Agency Monday. This has been a wild day. I don't know. Like you've got to have Twitter on refresh constantly.
It's crazy. Diane Ursini, Tom Pelissaro, Adam Schefter, they're all breaking Rappaport. They're all breaking stories right now.
Yeah, left and right. This is a big day for those who have fast, twitchy thumbs. That's for sure. So, all right, here we go. Let's launch ourselves into this big discussion here on Monday, March 11th, the beginning of free agency. All right, as mentioned, we just got done with a great talk with Chris Truelove. Go check out that video if you haven't already. But since we've spent a lot of time today on free agency and whatnot, we are going to hit the big topic ones right now, sticking with the quarterbacks and going to talk some of those running backs as well. We're going to have a later episode for you as more free agency news comes around. We'll be able to recap all of the crazy news that has come out. But obviously, Mark, overnight, around midnight, I think Russell Wilson kind of broke the news himself. There you go. Playing the Renegade promo on X. I love it, dude. I love that Styx is intertwined with my Steelers fandom.
Yeah. 1 year, what, $2 million league minimum?
$1.2 million. A cool $1.2 million. So that's
opposite of Kirk Cousins.
The biggest thing of this. It's very much the opposite of Kirk Cousins. Yeah, that's the biggest thing of this news, I think, is that regardless, I mean, we'll talk about the fit and if this makes sense. It does for a lot of reasons, but the fact that they only have to pay $1.2 million, the price of a backup for a quarterback that is probably top 20 in the league, I would think you could still make that argument today. That's a no-brainer for Pittsburgh, right? I mean, just tossing to you for initial thoughts. That's who wouldn't want to, take that deal if you're a team looking for a quarterback to add to the room.
Yeah, listen, Pittsburgh, they've officially put Kenny Pickett 100% on notice. This is going to be, it seems like an open competition to start, with I think Russ already starting with like maybe the first step, like a step ahead, and may the best man win. And if you're Russ, you say to yourself, okay, I have a win now roster. I have weapons. I have a culture. I have, yes, a tougher division, and yes, a tough AFC. I'm stuck in the AFC, but if things go well and I can lead Pittsburgh to the playoffs and win this job, then maybe I can get myself a 2-year, more money guaranteed, and wind my career in Pittsburgh, which is a great place, historically to be. And if you're Kenny Pickett, you say to yourself, if I can go into camp and I can beat out Russ, who's legitimate competition, who's fighting for his career, well, then I've earned the right to be the starter. And I no one will question it in that regard, because Russ is going to be as motivated as possible to win now. Anyways, I think Russ will win the job. I think Russ will start. A lot of it'll just be then you're going to be in this world of hurt where if they are, 3-3 through 6 weeks and coming off a really ugly loss at Cincinnati, and Russ threw 2 interceptions, it was the reason they lost the game. Are you cheering for Kenny Pickett? Like that's the only thing I fear for you, is that's going to be the fandom. I've been there as a fan. It is the worst scenario. Having 2 quarterbacks is way worse than having 1 quarterback.
Yeah. I mean, that's like the old story phrase of if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. I think Bill Walsh may have said that, when the Joe Montana and Steve Young situation arose. But yeah, I agree. I mean, it's not the most ideal situation all around, just looking at it holistically, certainly for Kenny Pickett. But for the Pittsburgh Steelers and everything moving forward. But it's one of those things where it's like, oh God, that's such a bargain. Like you have to do it, especially for a team that was needed to add to the room to begin with. Mitch Trubisky was out.
An upgrade.
Mason Rudolph is a free agent. You don't know if he's coming back. So really you were stuck with one quarterback. You had to get new guys in. Ryan Tannehill was the thought for a while because of his history with Arthur Smith. But my point has always been, they've said all along that they wanted that it was going to be a competition this year, regardless. Like Kenny Pickett was going to be in a competition, and it never felt right if that competition was Mason Rudolph versus Kenny Pickett, because we've already kind of see that last year where Kenny was healthy and they stuck with the hot hand Mason Rudolph. But also, how much does that push Kenny Pickett? How much of it is a settling either way type of situation? And then you bring Ryan Tannehill in, and it's clear at this point of his career that it wasn't going to be that much of a fire under the belly type of thing. But getting a Russell Wilson in, a guy that literally is a starting quarterback in this league.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden it's, hey, Kenny, like this is the time to put up or shut up for your career and for your tenure here as the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback. Go out, win the job, or else we're moving on, essentially. And so I think from that perspective, this will probably help provide clarity. If Kenny Pickett does end up starting games because of a situation where Russell's playing poorly or whatever, then I think already the decision's been made. I think whoever starts week 1, the decision is going to be made then on what the future of Kenny Pickett is. If it's Kenny Pickett, he beat out Russell Wilson. We're riding with Kenny. And at least for this year, we're going to give him an opportunity to see how it is. If it's Russell Wilson, then we are punting on the Kenny Pickett experiment. Even if he comes back and plays because Russ is performing poorly, it's going to be a separation at some point regardless. He's clearly not the quarterback of the future. So from that perspective, I think this is all going to provide clarity on that front. I agree with you. I think Russ is going to win this job, and I think it's his job to lose, essentially. I do think they'll still give an opportunity for competition there, of course. But if Russell doesn't end up being the starting quarterback at this point, then, either Kenny just absolutely balled out or something went completely wrong one way or the other. So I think regardless, the good thing for Steelers fans and for Pittsburgh is that they're almost guaranteed to get better quarterback play this year than they did last year. And from that perspective, I'm feeling good. You won 10 games last year with pretty rough quarterback play throughout with Matt Canada. Now you bring in Arthur Smith, a very competent offensive coordinator, a guy who has had success with his offense.
Well, he has
now
a
you insert
too.
a potential Hall of Fame quarterback into the mix.
Yeah.
I think that bodes well. The one knot that I see is that I don't know how well Russell Wilson really fits with Arthur Smith's offense, because Arthur Smith is a very rhythm-based and a very intentional offense. And Russell Wilson is so heavily built on his career of being an out-of-structure guy. Arthur Smith is very much structure. He creates plays out of the same formation. 15 different variations of a play can come from that one formation. So Russell is going to have to go we're going with the hot read on this one. We're going with the designated plays. And so if Russell can adapt to that style, then I think that it could be, very beneficial for all parties involved. But yeah, $1.2 million, an opportunity for him to, end his career the way he wants to, and still making $40 million from the Denver Broncos in the process.
No, it's the right fit, and it's not a shock. I don't think any of us are shocked. It seemed like that's where the tides were turning, and and if you're Pittsburgh, if it's a disaster this year, well, then it creates that clarity too of we just need to completely start over, and maybe even just go into a rebuild. You know what I mean? Sell off the pieces and start fresh. But you'll know a year from now, you'll have a ton more answers than you'll have questions.
Absolutely. And that's the name of the game right there. And look, they're just seeking their first playoff win in 7 years. And so get Russell in here, get TJ Watt a playoff win. He hasn't had one. Like, these guys aren't getting any younger. And so, this to me said, we need to move faster here. Like Kenny, we can't wait for Kenny any longer. Yeah. It's been 2 seasons, and Russell's at least a guy that now gets them in that position where they can legitimately compete for a playoff win. I don't know about Super Bowl, but playoff win at least puts them in a better position there to compete on that front. So going off of that, and by the way, I'm seeing a lot of speculation about why Russ would, take this job if he wasn't guaranteed a starting spot. I don't think he was guaranteed a starting spot. I think for Russell Wilson, if you have the opportunity to sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers now, as free agency is going into a frenzy, strike while the kettle's hot, because if Russell waited 3-4 days, who knows what the market is? We just saw Kirk Cousins just signed with the Atlanta Falcons. Like, anything could happen. All of a sudden, what was Russell Wilson's market?
And listen, Russ, Russ was not getting. He was getting league minimum. No. So he's going to get league minimum wherever he was going. And you might as well go where you feel like you have the best chance to win. And I think Pittsburgh was his best chance to earn it, because he wasn't going to Atlanta. Atlanta clearly, now they with this contract of this deal, they were 100% all in on Kirk no matter what. And we could start with that now if you want to move to that.
Yeah, let's get into it. Let's talk about Kirk Cousins. You've got the numbers.
4 years, $180 million for Kirk Cousins. 100 of it, which is fully guaranteed. He'll get 50 at signing, which was today. That's his money for this year. He'll get 40 next year in 2025, and then 10 in 2026, which basically makes him, it's like a 2-year deal. So it's a 4-year deal, but it's really like, can you right the ship for us? Can we get this culture figured out and win with these young, talented players and this good defense in this weak division? Can we win in the next 2 years? Then once things are set, now we draft your replacement. You start for year 3 in 2026, and you go and you build from there. So Atlanta clearly has said to themselves, this is now our 3-year window. This is our plan for the next 3 years. We think we can become a winning organization. I don't think this is a let's win a Super Bowl move. This is a, can we become a stable winning organization with this head coach and this culture, and he can help that. And if that's worth $100 million to Arthur Blank and a team that had cap space, so be it. In the NFC, it makes sense. He's still, to me, the concern is he's still coming off an Achilles injury.
Right. Yeah.
So that's where I would be like, ugh. And clearly no one else was going to come close to the money. Because I think if the money was close, he would have stayed in Minnesota. But I think when you're offered 4 years and you're offered $100 million guaranteed, it's really easy to keep your nice house and even maybe the majority of your life in Minnesota and come on down to Atlanta for a couple of years. While your kids aren't in school yet. He's got young kids. Like I think this move was easier than we thought it would be. And the money they threw at him, it makes sense. If you're Kirk Cousins, you take that. If what is your value? Well, it's whatever someone's willing to pay you.
100. Yeah.
I think Atlanta probably outbid themselves, but they wanted it to just be done, to be a lock, a home run for them. And it feels like that they're celebrating today in Atlanta.
Man, I feel like you got to be really concerned if you're Minnesota now, because what's the game plan? You could be very, very easily entering a tumultuous couple-year period here if you're not able to
they're in trouble.
Move up and draft your quarterback of the future. Do they take a guy like JJ McCarthy this year who might be available to them there in the first round?
They're at 11.
I don't know what they're
at 11.
Is. Yeah,
and so they'd have to.
Guys.
You'd have to do a lot to move up, and there's and that's given up a lot of stuff. And we've said already with Minnesota right now, they're a team that needs young talent, like losing draft picks. They're in an interesting situation. They
are.
They have a great offensive coach. They have maybe the best wide receiver core in the league, depending on if Cincinnati actually trades T. Higgins or not. And so they've got to go and now be aggressive. And whether that's Justin Fields, whether that's drafting at 11, whether that's trading up, Minnesota will be active. And that'll be something that maybe we'll know when we record on Friday, like what their plan is. Yeah. But if paying $100 million wasn't in the plan for Kirk, and I don't blame them for not doing that. Trust me. Yeah, I don't blame them for not doing that. It is, we got to see what envelops for them, because I think just hoping that JJ McCarthy, Bo Nix, or Michael Penix Jr. is just the guy with those weapons you have, that's a lot of hoping. It's a lot of hoping.
It is. Well, and at the same time, you have to do something, I think, to show Justin Jefferson that, like,
Yes.
okay, you need to, like, because one rough year of, like, if they're going with Jacoby Brissett or something like that, no shade on Jacoby, like, he's a great fill-in quarterback. He has been for a long time, but it's just Justin Jefferson, we've already seen some moments here of frustration on his end, and rumors of potentially wanting to be traded. If you don't give him a guy that can get him the ball soon, he's going to want to spend the prime of his career elsewhere, and so
Yeah.
you got to want to help retain your talent at the same time that you already have here. To your point about Atlanta, with Kirk, this was a move that kind of said, yes, we're ready to steady the ship, compete for the division. This is also a thing where, like, hey, it's possible to do that, given that we're in the NFC South. If the Falcons were in the AFC East or in the AFC North or something like that, I don't know what move would have made more sense for them in terms of trying to get over that hump. But right now, they could say we've got probably the best quarterback in the division, and we've got all of these skill position players. We've got a new young head coach. Like, we can win the division next year easily. By the way, look out Dennis Allen now, because Baker Mayfield's back in Tampa. They looked pretty good last year. Atlanta now is Kirk Cousins. And so all of a sudden, that hot seat just got a little bit hotter. And Carolina now, maybe they feel like, oh, we've got now a few more years of our rope, because we're just not going to compete next year for this division at that point. But
I mean, look at that quarterback division we're going to talk about here next. Baker re-signs for $100 million, less guarantee. It's a much better deal. Baker is very
50
similar,
guaranteed.
Yeah, I mean, it's a much more workable deal for Tampa over the next 3 years. I mean, you compare it with Kirk and with Derek Carr, who's now got 3 years left at 120 million or 110 million. So you look at those three guys plus Bryce Young, that is a weak quarterback division overall. But it does feel like if you end up only winning 5 games in that division and your quarterback is a part of the reason why, everyone's job is on the chopping block, because that is unacceptable. Every one of those teams should be 9-8 next year, right? Maybe not Carolina. They're maybe another year away from that. But if you're Tampa, if you're New Orleans, if you're Atlanta, it is win now, and 2 of them aren't going to win it, just like this past year. So this division just got even more interesting. But I would say this morning, even though Tampa's the defending champs and they re-signed Baker on a really good deal, I like the deal. I support the deal. I'm a fan of Baker staying in Tampa. I think it all makes sense. And it's basically a 2-year deal, where Kirk's is basically a 3-year deal. It's 4, but it's 3. Baker's is 3, but it's 2. Godspeed to the quarterback who doesn't win that division and only wins 7 games, because
no kidding,
them and their organization is going to be a nightmare.
I think good for Baker Mayfield first and foremost. I think the guy bet on himself. His career appeared to be over as a starting quarterback once he left Cleveland and left all of that money on the table that he could have gotten from the Browns. Now, maybe in hindsight, he still should have taken that deal.
Oh, 100%.
The Browns certainly hope that he took that deal, because they would be saddled with $30 million
100%
right now. But he turns around here and gets an opportunity to put $100 million more in his bank, 50 at a minimum. And so, good on him. And Tampa gets to stay competitive. They inked Mike Evans already. So they're very stable right now. They feel solid, and an opportunity here to still compete for that division and be the owners of that division within the next 3 years. And really, Mark, I mean, unless you're the Chiefs, unless you're the Bills or the Bengals, most of these teams are always at any given time just in a 3-year window. A lot of guys, you can't really plan that far ahead.
No.
In this league, because so many things happen, injuries happen, players leave that you didn't think you would. So to be able to say we're Tampa and we're good for the next 2 to 3 years, we have our quarterback, we have a lot of the
Mike
guys
Evans
in place,
back.
that's a good place to be for a lot of teams. A lot of teams wish they could be there. And so
it'll be really
from that
interesting
aspect,
to see everyone's NFC South predictions next year. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like
I know, right?
August
like,
and predicting the NFC South is going to be fun. I mean, it's going to be the most like kind of talked about division of the, you want to talk about the exciting good divisions, but that one's going to be thrilling in its own weird way. And the news just keeps on breaking. As we said, we will have an episode later this week that kind of, once the dust settles and really kind of go through overall what certain teams are doing. But Dan, couple big free agent running back contracts. We got a new home for Josh Jacobs. We got a new home for Saquon Barkley and a new home for DeAndre Swift. I was on record saying that there would only be 2 running backs I'd be willing to give a 3-year deal to, and that was Swift and that was Jacobs. Well, Saquon got a 3-year deal too from the Eagles. Eagles on Saquon. Yeah. Were you surprised versus the Cowboys? I thought the Cowboys maybe would have been more favorites to land one of the big running backs versus the Eagles, but they gave him $26 million guaranteed.
It's a lot of money for the running back market, but he was one of those teams that I thought would be a very interesting and cool fit for Saquon. Yeah. Houston was another that I thought maybe they would, take a stab, but so far, I mean, all of the top free agent running backs outside of Derrick Henry have themselves a new home. So it doesn't seem like Houston is going to be in play unless they do go and get a Derrick Henry, but that doesn't seem like as good of a fit. But the Saquon with Philadelphia makes a lot of sense to me, and I think it gives them maybe a little bit more stability at the position, that they know what they're going to get, and a true 3-down player at that position. So I think that's really big. And the Eagles, struggled to run the ball a lot at times last year, and just disjointed as an offense entirely. So I think anytime you can add a playmaker of his quality to your offense, you're going to feel really good about it. But especially an Eagles team that is built so much on the run and have a quarterback that, runs a lot as well, you're going to be able to really do a lot of interesting things with Saquon there in that offense. And, what you didn't mention was Tony Pollard is going to the Titans, a 3-year, $24 million.
That's a lot.
Deal.
I don't love that deal.
It's a lot for Tony Pollard for
He's
sure.
He's 32. The other guys are younger. Swift and Jacobs are 26. I think Saquon's 27. Pollard's already 30. And I get it. He's a different back. You're going to use him differently. Like I expect them still to have like a power run game, and Tony Pollard is a compliment, but that's a lot. Aaron Jones just got released.
Yeah. So to make room for Josh Jacobs, which is
Josh Jacobs in Green Bay, that to me signals, I think they maybe keep A.J. Dillon too. Maybe the Green Bay tries to re-sign him, and they kind of like just retool that. Aaron Jones was getting more beat up, in his older age. And this kind of, resets like, hey, we're still going to be an efficient running team. I like the move actually for Green Bay. I like the move a lot for Josh Jacobs. I hate it as a Bears fan, but if you're going to a team like Green Bay, you're going from a really dysfunctional organization to a really functional organization, and you're the guy. I said it from day one. I was comfortable giving Swift and Jacobs 3-year deals, and I don't think they overpaid for Josh Jacobs, and I certainly don't think the Bears overpaid for Swift either.
Yeah, no, I'd like to hear your thoughts on Swift, because obviously, the Bears couldn't figure out that running back room last year, and it was kind of a mess in terms of what they were getting. They at least now get a guy who's got that star power to him. I mean, we saw flashes in Detroit and even in Philadelphia last year as well. But now, I mean, does it concern you at all that he's now been a journeyman essentially of 3 teams in 2.5 years? Does that concern you?
The thing that was interesting is that, remember, he was the featured back, and then Detroit revamped their whole backfield last season. They draft Gibbs and they signed Montgomery. And Detroit's whole thing was, I think they knew they had Gibbs as a target, and so they were going to move on, in that regard anyways. I will say it doesn't concern me, because the Bears have Roschon Johnson. They drafted him last year, so they still got him for 3 more years to kind of, they're going to be the backfield, right? Mm-hmm. You have Swift and Roschon, and you have another year of Khalil Herbert still on a rookie contract where you're not going to pay him. You're probably not going to re-sign Khalil. The Bears were the second best rushing team in the NFL last year. Now, that includes Justin Fields, and they didn't have a number one back. Swift is a number one back, and when you team him up now with the backfield with those other names, all of a sudden, yeah, I mean, overall, you're paying your running back room about $11 million a year. That's, for your running back room, really solid for a team that commits to running the football and has now a really unique stable backs. No, I'm happy about the Swift deal because, again, he's young, he's in his prime, and it's really a 2-year deal. Again, it's a 2-year, $14 million guaranteed. Like, people are panicking a little bit about the number, but in the end, they can move off this and not face a cap hit. Remember, the cap went up, so you're going to have to spend, and the Bears had the second most cap space to spend anyways.
Exactly. No, it's a good move for them, and any way that you can go into the draft without having a must draft at a position is always good to and those options open for yourself. And
I know we'll talk again on Friday. We'll do a whole show kind of revamping, but for the Bears, just quickly, it's exactly what you said. They filed safety, Kevin Bird, you know what I mean? Then you get Swift. You get Jalen Johnson on the big contract. All of a sudden, your draft needs shrink, and it's a really, really great thing. That's what free agency should be about: shrinking your needs so your draft plan becomes clear. Minnesota, their draft plan, I don't know. I guess it's going to be a quarterback, and if you're Atlanta, your draft plan now has to be offensive line, protect your investment for the next 2 years, and make a defense that is capable of being the best in that division, because we saw at times that it was flashy, but man, today is just one of those days, and it's just such a fun day. And what certain teams are doing, the Eagles are spending a ton of money, kind of going all in. That's why the Saquon,
Landon Dickerson,
the Saquon deal feels very, when Fletcher Cox retired, we didn't get a chance to talk about that.
Yep.
But the Saquon deal feels very exciting and also very like, oh man, if things don't work out, I mean, Nick Sirianni's on the hot seat, and now you're adding in, you're spending a ton of money in free agency, and this is a team with very much high expectations. The Eagles could be ready to implode. I mean, this is going to be so much fun to watch. And this is why we love the NFL.
Great time of year, man. It's a great time of year. That's why we do the show, and that's why the show does not stop after the Super Bowl, because we've got days like this where we have too much to talk about, frankly. So yeah, as you alluded to, another episode here on the Football Lounge with Mark and Dan to recap even more of the free agency frenzy coming later this week. The tweets are not going to stop. The news is not going to stop flowing for several days. So we'll have a much more holistic, comprehensive look at all of this later on this week. But for now, that will do it for us here on the show. Like, subscribe. We really appreciate all of the support. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you back here sooner rather than later.